Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us today for the Acchutha Inspire Series 21. We are truly delighted to have you with us for the inspiring session. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce our distinguished speaker, Dr. Najiya, a research fellow at the High-End Brain Research Lab at the Translational Visual Neuroscience Group, Center for Innovation and Precision Eye Health, Department of Ophthalmology, Yong Lin School of Medicine at the National University of Singapore. Dr. Najiya completed her undergraduate and postgraduate studies in optometry from Elite School of Optometry, affiliated with BRITS. She went on to pursue a Ph.D. in neuroscience through a collaborative program with Erasmus Medical Center in the Netherlands and a medical research foundation in Chennai. Her doctoral research focused on developing eye tracking based biomarkers for detecting visual system dysfunction, an area of immense clinical and research significance. She further expanded her expertise through postdoctoral fellowship where her work explored a real-life functional consequences of visual impairment, particularly in relationship to visual motor integration. In recognition of her academic excellence, she was awarded the prestigious FAAO under the scientific category. Currently, Dr. Najiya researches focuses on understanding the mechanism and the application of light therapy in preventing and controlling myopia progression along with developing innovative technological driven approaches in visual neuroscience. On a more personal note, it gives me an immense pride to share that Dr. Najiya has been not only a senior but also a mentor to me during my academic and professional journey. Her guidance and dedication have been truly inspiring. Without further delay, let us extend a warm welcome to Dr. Najiya and invite her to share her insight with us. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Shamla, for the very warm welcome. I hope my slide is visible and my voice is audible enough, right?
Yes, ma'am. Your slide is visible and your voice is clear.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to sincerely thank the Acchutha Institute of Optometry for inviting me to be a part of the Inspire series. And hello to everybody, students and professionals. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Um, I will be speaking on progress with a purpose, backpedaling through my research journey. So, this session won't be like overly formal or technical. Instead, I would like to take you through a journey that um, blends research with personal experiences, lessons, and reflections. Um, because I believe sometimes moving forward um, isn't just about the next big step. It's also about like pausing, um, revisiting where we started, and understanding how each step, even the uh, uncertain ones, has shaped our progress. So I'll share what I have learned, the challenges I have navigated, and the steps I have taken along the way. I'm still learning, and I hope my journey can offer some insights and encouragement as you explore your own research paths. So let me begin where it all started. So I'm originally from the Indian state of Kerala, and I moved to the city of Chennai for my optometry education. I studied at the Elite School of Optometry, ESO, which was then affiliated with Birla Institute of Technology and Science, Pilani. ESO gave me my first exposure to research, mainly through the undergraduate research program. Um, at that stage, uh, it honestly felt like more like a coursework, but what truly inspired me were the mentors and seniors around me, the way they approached research and how confidently they presented their research work at conferences. So that left a strong impression on me and um, uh, became something I really looked up to. So, the institution also gave me space to grow through clinical exposure and opportunities like writing case reports and case series. So now looking back, I think that experience played a big role in my decision to return and pursue my postgraduate studies at the same institution. So during my master's, we had structured courses that really helped build a strong foundation in research. And alongside that, I worked on an independent project, which was a part of the curriculum. And that was sort of my first time experience of truly owning a research study. So that is when research started to, kind of feel much more real and meaningful to me. So after finishing my master's at ESO, I had to take a break due to personal reasons and return to my hometown. Um, Unfortunately, this break didn't go as I had hoped for, and it turned out to be a distressing and challenging period. So that time I was struggling to get back into a routine and was searching for something meaningful to hold on to. Then one day during that difficult phase, I received a phone call from Dr. Ronnie, who had been my supervisor for my master's project. And he's the research director and a senior glaucoma consultant at Shanganethralaya, Chennai. So he told me that his team was looking for a clinical researcher to work alongside Deepmala, then Deepmala, now Dr. Deepmala. So he recommended me for an Indo-European research project focused on developing an eye tracker based prototype for neuroocular diagnostics. So genuinely speaking, I didn't hesitate for a second. I immediately said yes, eager for a change and a fresh start. So I returned to Chennai, joined as a research associate, and began working closely with Deepmala and the collaborators. At that time, our work focused on developing a new device and validating its measurement protocols and interfaces. So the project involved three different parties: Shanganethralaya from India, Heads AS, Meditech company from Norway, and Erasmus Medical Center from the Netherlands. So working in such a multidisciplinary cross country project was both challenging and incredibly inspiring. So after approximately a year of working on our project, the team received an additional research grant. Dibmala was already in the first phase of her PhD, and she was the first Indian student under this international collaboration. That meant there was a room for another PhD student. Unfortunately, their first choice was me, being in the same loop. At first, I couldn't say yes. Yes, I was excited, of course, but I was full of doubts. Like, can I really do this? Am I capable? What if I fail? I felt overwhelmed and unsure. Um, so I went back to my family and they reminded me, even if you don't believe in yourself yet, we do. So take the chance. So after a while, I talked to Dr. Ronnie, Dr. Ashima Ashugan, who is my mentor, and my colleague and friend Dikmala, and they made me realize something very important. Um, Opportunities like this don't come every day. So doubting myself wouldn't help. Instead, I needed to believe, have a purpose, and slowly build the skill to chase my dream. So that was my first big lesson from the PhD. So even if research feels like far away or intimidating, um, start small, believe in yourself, and give yourself a chance. So now this is exactly my first lesson to pass on to you. Uh, Even when research or any other new opportunity feels far away or overwhelming, self doubt is normal. What matters is taking the first step, leaning on to your mentors and support system, and slowly building the confidence and skill sets to pursue your goals. So every journey starts with a single brave decision. That was my beginning, and I was enrolled for my PhD with Shanganethralaya in collaboration with Erasmus Medical Center. under the supervision of Prof. Hans van der Steen, Dr. Ronnie, and co-supervised by Dr. Johan Pell. This opportunity allowed me to continue working on the Indo-European research project. I had started as a research associate while also taking new challenges, learning from international mentors, and contributing to cutting edge developments in vision science. So during the enrollment, I was advised to submit the essential documents, including attested degree certificates and a few other forms. These were later verified and approved by the university's formal committee to officially uh, confirm my eligibility and candidature. So, as per university guidelines, PhD students are expected to define a um, broad research area, identify a focused working title, address a minimum of 5 research questions, conduct experiments to explore those questions, and publish at least 4 of the 5 experiments. So, only after completing these steps can a student begin preparing their thesis. So, submit it to the panel and proceed to the later stage. Like there were layman talks, defense viva, and the final ceremony. So, yes, it was a quite long journey ahead. So, the first step for me was to prepare a tentative PhD work plan. So, fortunately, my exposure to research methodology and basic statistical concepts during our master's program at ESO, along with training in literature search, um, framing research questions, and proposal writing, made it much easier, I should say, to get started. But at that point, the question was where do I find the research scope? So, from the very beginning of this journey, there was one point my PhD promoters kept emphasizing. Scientific research exists really to answer the needs of the clinical world, and there is always a flow of information back and forth. That means this point actually became my second important life lesson, I should say, in research. Research can never succeed in isolation. So, the gaps or questions that form the basis of research are hidden within the clinical system around us. So, it's up to us to identify them. So, research and clinical practice must go hand in hand, um, constantly informing and guiding each other. So, the area where we found our research gap was in perimetry. So, as we all know, perimetry is a very important part of an eye examination. In the conventional method, the patient is asked to fixate on a central point and respond to lights appearing in the periphery by pressing a button. But in reality, this isn't always easy, right? Like many patients, you would have seen them struggle to maintain steady fixation, and there is always this very natural tendency to look toward the light stimulus. So because of this, the test can become quite challenging, and sometimes the result may not be as reliable as we would like. So this made us think, can we approach this differently? Of course, standard automated perimetry will remain as the clinical gold standard, but is there a way to come up with an alternative approach to assess visual field? Maybe something that can complement that we already have and make the process a bit more um intuitive or patient friendly. Um, so started by doing a proper literature review just to understand what is already out there and where the gaps might be. And through that, we came across a few alternative approaches to perimetry. So one that we really got interested in was eye movement perimetry. So in eye movement perimetry, let me abbreviate it as EMP. Instead of asking patients to press a button, this method actually uses their eye movements as a response. So when a stimulus appears, the idea is simple. The patient just looks at it. And that is where saccades come in. Those, as you know, quick eye movements we make while we keep shifting our gaze. So these saccades have different properties. So, but one important one to remember among the saccade parameters is reaction time or latency. Basically, the time taken by the eyes to initiate a saccade after a stimulus appears. So, and this is what exactly what EMP uses. It relies on these natural reflexive eye movements to actually map the visual field. But then the question was, how do we actually quantify these saccades? That's where we turned to eye tracking technology. It's a reliable technique that uses cameras to track the position and movements of the eyes in real time. So we thought, why not use this to our advantage? So we decided to build on this technology to complement existing perimetry approaches and work towards developing a more objective and potentially faster system. And that's how we moved toward developing our own eye movement perimetry setup. So, in the first phase of my PhD, I focused on extracting saccadic eye movement parameters using eye tracking technology and exploring their potential as functional biomarkers of visual system integrity. I don't know if that sounded a bit more complex than it needs to be. So let me take a step back. I will first introduce our eye tracking based EMP prototype, then walk you through the customized measurement protocol, and finally share the key findings. So this was our EMP test setup that consisted of a 17-inch TFT display with an inbuilt eye tracking device. The test was conducted at a viewing distance of approximately 60 centimeter in a dimly lit room, with external noises kept to a minimum. Uh, the EMP test began with a pre-tracking status check, followed by the device inbuilt calibration procedure. So these initial steps were to ensure proper eye alignment and accurate gaze tracking. Calibration was repeated for specific points or for all the 9 cardinal points whenever necessary. So, after a successful pre tracking status estimation and a successful calibration, the actual EMP test protocol commenced. Our customized protocol presented a fixation target against a fixed background illumination, while peripheral visual stimuli at various intensities are projected on like sequentially using an overlap paradigm. So similar to the approach used in conventional perimetry test on the HFA. So I know I use the word overlap paradigm just for you to understand. It refers to the experimental setup in which the fixation target remains visible throughout the test, even when the eccentric peripheral stimuli appear. Um, so you might get a better idea from this gaze signal video. As you can see, the fixation target is at the corner, then is at the center, and then a peripheral stimulus appears and the participants initiates an eye movement towards it, and this peripheral stimuli keep appearing at random locations within the visual field. So in brief, in EMP, instead of pressing the response button, eye movements were regarded as the index of perception, and we used a grid that was conventional to the HFA's 24-2 grid. We also had 54 locations for the monocular testing, and in addition we also had binocular grid using a 56 test location grid. So once we recorded the eye movements, we stored all the data for further analysis. During the processing phase, we used a custom written program to visually inspect the raw gaze data from all the trials. So each test location was then classified as either seen, unseen, or invalid based on clear predefined criteria. From the locations marked as seen, we calculated the saccadic reaction time. So, after we designed the test protocol, the next step was to see how feasible it was and whether it could actually be applied in a controlled lab based setting. So, our first group of participants included healthy controls as well as adults diagnosed with glaucoma. Um, Now, let me share one of the first exciting results from our data. Uh, first of all, our prototype integrated with the customized EMP protocol worked really well. Over 90% of the participants we recruited, they completed the test successfully. So that was kind of a big hooray moment for us. And then next we looked at eye movement performance, that is the percentage of seen, unseen, and invalid responses between healthy participants and those with glaucoma. So, what we found was the participants with glaucoma had significantly more unseen responses. And we also compared the SRTs, that is the saccadic reaction time, between the groups. So, here we saw the people with glaucoma had noticeable delays in initiating their eye movements compared to their age matched healthy controls. So, finally, we also noticed that SRT wasn't just influenced by glaucoma, it was also significantly affected by age, eccentricity of the stimulus, that is, where exactly within the visual field the stimulus appeared, and the intensity of the stimulus. So these findings basically gave us the green light to move forward. The method seemed feasible in adults. We were able to reliably record their eye movements, and we could also use the eye movement performances and the corresponding SRT to tell whether someone's visual system was healthy or not. So the next step for us was to try generating visual field plots based on these eye movement responses, while keeping in mind the kind of visual field plots you typically see on a standard HFA report. We went on to generate a set of visual field responsiveness plots based on the eye movement performance patterns and the corresponding saccadic reaction time. For example, one plot showed as seen, unseen, or invalid responses, like you see here on the top panel, and yet another highlighted the deviation of SRT from a normative database. So these plots turned out to be really useful. They helped us to understand not just the presence of delays in saccade responses, but also their extent, the depth, etc. So, importantly, they showed um, a promising level of agreement with the clinical findings we were seeing. Um, by the way, in the years that followed, we published these findings in peer reviewed journals. So these findings were from the Indian ethnic cohort. So our next step was to investigate whether there were any differences in eye movement responses and corresponding SRTs between different ethnic groups. So, as I said before, being part of the international collaborative network, we had access to both Indian and Dutch cohorts. So we evaluated the influence of ethnicity along with other factors such as age and stimulus characteristics on SRT, enrolling close to 200 participants. And from the statistical analysis, we found that SRTs are a reliable index to discriminate healthy controls from glaucoma in both Indian and Dutch cohorts, even when using ethnic specific normative database or swap databases. So that typically means that specific SRT normative databases are not strictly required to estimate visual field responsiveness using the proposed EMP protocol. So this finding formed the basis for one of the important chapters of my thesis. Um, at this stage, our testing protocol was like a full field one, like taking about 12 minutes per eye. So naturally, the next step for us was to revamp it into a quicker screening mode. So for this, we focused primarily on India. given the high prevalence of sight-threatening diseases like glaucoma in the subcontinent, and many of which remain unfortunately undetected in the community, like close to 90% of the time. So we followed a scientific approach, sought input from clinical experts, and relied on statistical analysis to figure out the best test strategy, deciding on stimulus intensity levels and the most suitable test locations for screening. So, our first step in this process was to create an intermediate test grid with 36 locations, and that intermediate grid was later refined based on statistical analysis into a 26 location grid. So, our final screening protocol showed a promising ability to um, distinguish glaucomatous loss from responses of age matched healthy participants. So once we had these promising findings, I was invited to visit my university for the first time, also my first international trip. I planned everything with the Mala, and having her as my travel partner was incredibly helpful and supportive. After layovers in Bangalore, Paris, we finally landed at Schiphol Airport, and the next day I was at my university for the first time. It was an exciting and unforgettable experience, so I wanted to mention it here. During that visit, we also had the wonderful opportunity to attend the Vision Conference at the World Forum in the city of Hague. We presented our findings there, and it was my first international scientific forum. Um, I still remember it was probably the largest convention center I had seen till that point, and I was standing in front of one of the biggest scientific audiences I had ever faced. Um, but then, even after a good conference and promising findings, the process of writing the first manuscript was not that easy. Um, okay, then I should tell you the story. Um, Maybe this is more interesting than the actual research bit of it. So, after the successful conference presentation, I submitted my first draft of the manuscript to Dr. Johan Pell, my co promoter, uh, believing that I had written it fairly well. Of course, not 100% perfect, but I was assuming maybe I did a fairly good job. I was very confident until Dr. Pell read it and called me to his office and said, Nanj, he calls me Nanj. So, good attempt, but you have a long, long way to go. So I was like, no more smile on my face, heartbeat high, because uh, that was the first impression I could have created with my so-called writing skills. So he immediately understood my disappointment and told me, um, never ever jump into writing text. Take a blank piece of paper and picturize what you want to write. So, describe your story in the desired sequence with illustrations. They can be figures, graphs, tables, flowcharts, and that makes the best first step. So, when you are at a point where your illustrations are satisfactory, then it is the right time for you to stretch them, elaborate, describe them. Um, and for the conclusion of the story, draft 42 of the manuscript was submitted to Graphes Archive for Clinical and Experimental Ophthalmology, and it was accepted with minor revisions. So, from this whole story came my lesson number 3. Rejections and feedbacks are not setbacks, they are part of your learning. Okay, over to the next story. Our next step was to evaluate the screening accuracy of our protocol in comparison with the clinical standard. So, we didn't have a perfect gold standard, but the frequency doubling perimeter, you might have heard of it, I believe, abbreviated as FDP, is a sort of widely used screening approach that point in time, and this was added to our research protocol. So, in addition to assessing feasibility and applicability, it was also important for us to understand the participants' perception of this method. So we administered questionnaires. So once we had collected enough data and we were ready for analysis, we traveled to the university again. And this time we had the opportunity to visit our technical collaborators in Norway. So we stayed in this beautiful house on the coast of Fjord. Oh, Norway is beautiful. And it was there that these promising graphs that you see were born, and showing excellent screening accuracy of our protocol compared to conventional clinical outcomes. So, through the questionnaires, our participants reported that the test procedure was easy, especially because it allowed, natural free eye movements, making it more like a more realistic testing scenario. And they also felt that the task required less concentration when performed on eye movement perimetry. The clinical comparison of EMP with FTP, along with the participant preference results, was successfully presented at the World Glaucoma Congress in Melbourne. And the very next day, we received positive reviewer comments for the paper, which was later published as a follow-up paper in Graphis. Okay, immediately, then we decided to celebrate this second milestone. Um, Drove along the Great Ocean Road to be awestruck by this spectacular view of the world famous extraordinary collection of like wave sculpted rocks and the limestone stacks, the 12 apostles. It was literally then that I realized a PhD is a big goal and not an easy one to achieve. So on the way, there will be, a lot of hard work, tiredness, anxiety, uncertainty, disappointments, and rejections. But if you can surpass all of that and reach a single milestone, it truly deserves to be celebrated. And that became my lesson number 4. Celebrate every single milestone on the way to a bigger goal. All right, so when we found success in evaluating the proposed protocol among healthy controls and glaucoma patients, our next question was, what is the clinical reliability of using SRT as a basis to detect and monitor presence and extent of visual field defects associated with neuroophthalmic conditions? So we started by exploring this particular case. This is the clinical course of a 26-year-old female who presented with gradually worsening eye in both eyes, along with bilateral pain during eye movements over the preceding week. Uh, Clinical evaluation revealed severely reduced visual acuity in the right eye more than the left, relative afferent pupillary defect, bilateral disc edema, and constricted visual fields on standard automated perimetry. So after the regular battery of investigations, as she should undergo as a conventional protocol, the patient also underwent eye movement perimetry using both monocular and binocular protocols to obtain SRTs to seen peripheral locations. So our custom generated EMP plots that you see here on the right showed severely declined visual field responsiveness consistent with the conventional findings. So this patient was advised to undergo intravenous corticosteroid treatment along with immunotherapy. So after the treatment, she was reevaluated for both structural and functional aspects of vision, including EMP. So during this follow-up, we recorded a significant improvement in both structural and functional measures of vision. These improvements corresponded closely with the visual field responsiveness maps generated using EMP. So in short, this preliminary report showed that visual field responsiveness predicted by EMP correlated well with the structural and functional diagnostic outcomes, both during the active stage of the disease and throughout the recovery. So this finding suggests that assessing Saccard-based parameters using a rapid standardized EMP test has real clinical implications, not only as a diagnostic and screening tool, but also as a prognostic method in neuroophthalmic conditions. So this became the basis for yet another chapter of my thesis. So, in summary, we found that EMP is feasible and clinically applicable among adults, both in glaucoma and in neuroophthalmic conditions. And our next goal was to explore the potential of our system in the pediatric population. So, to evaluate this, we enrolled healthy children as well as children presenting with ophthalmic manifestations due to intracranial lesions. So, the healthy children were recruited from a school in Rotterdam, while the patients came from the Erasmus MC Sophia Children's Hospital. For this, we sort of minimally refined our adult setup and called it as eye movement pediatric perimetry, or EMPP. So if you remember, the adult EMP used a chin rest. But when we dealt with children, we removed it, giving them a more naturalistic and unrestricted environment. This was feasible because the eye tracker that we used could compensate for some amount of head motion. And in addition, instead of the white circular visual stimuli, we used smiley faces at a single intensity to just to keep children engaged and maintain their attention. We also recorded their overall performance using a webcam. So EMPP was successfully performed in both monocular and binocular conditions by 94% of healthy control, 94% of healthy controls and almost 89% of patients. We even included children under 4 years of age, and it was successfully and reliable. Like it was successful, and we could generate reliable outputs. So EMP appeared to be a reliable method to estimate and characterize the central 30-degree visual field in greater detail for children with intracranial lesions. So it sort of supplements the conventional methods, and we published this work in the Journal of Helion, which became the basis for yet another chapter of my thesis. So there was another important learning from these neuroophthalmic cases. As we know, evaluating the pupil and its reactivity is integral in such cases, and we realized that eye tracking technology can also be used for pupil evaluation. So our next step was to explore integrating pupil-based parameters as an additional index alongside saccadic reaction time, so that we can better assess the integrity of the visual system. So we also wanted to test the clinical applicability of a customized pupilometer system in detecting pupillary defects associated with neuroophthalmic condition. So typically, how do we do pupil evaluation is using a swinging flashlight test. We often use neutral density filters to quantify the amount of RAPD. While this is a critical procedure and relatively simple to perform, it is still a gross estimation, right? And it heavily depends on the clinical expertise of the examiner. So we thought, why not integrate EMP with a pupilometer protocol? So this could add significant clinical value in detecting visual system dysfunctions. So developing a binocular pupillometry protocol wasn't possible with our single screen setup. So we designed and built a modified experimental prototype. It featured dual monitors with an eye tracking camera arranged within the haploscopic optics, allowing us to stimulate both eyes either independently or simultaneously. So we also added a third monitor where the examiner could input relevant commands and monitor the test in real time. To this system, we incorporated the validated AMP protocol along with the pupillometry protocol. So creating an integrated setup for assessing saccadic eye movements and pupil responses. So in brief, our pupillometry protocol was I would say a digitalized version of the conventional swinging flashlight test, where light and dark stimulation panels were used to evoke pupil responses. From the recorded pupil dynamics data, we generated pupillograms, which are pupil light reflex, that is PLR response curves, with pupil diameter plotted on the y-axis as a function of time, as you see here. And then the raw traces were superimposed with best fit lines to analyze the time course of the pupil trajectory and quantify pupil parameters. So since our objectives was to evaluate the feasibility of our system, among healthy controls first, we had access to healthy participants between 20 to 29 years old with light and dark colored iris, because from the Indo and Dutch cohort, thanks for our collaboration, we had access to a variety of iris colors. This data set was probably the last set of data I needed to finalize the mandatory chapters of my thesis. Thank God, we collected it from Erasmus MC and we traveled back in the last week of February 2020 from the Netherlands to Chennai. Just 2 weeks later, the news of the COVID-19 pandemic hit and we were all under a global lockdown. Fortunately, I already had this data set ready for post processing and analysis. Um, I was in a way very relaxed because like I knew I had the necessary data, but I had no idea what a Herculean task awaited me. This was by far the longest, broadest data set I had ever dealt with. Countless parameters and 16 different stimulation panels. And on top of that, we didn't have a gold standard or clinical benchmark to evaluate the reliability of our data. So I still remember it was close to 1 a.m. and I was literally drowning in this data set, making the same mistakes over and over again. Whenever I shared the spreadsheet with my co-promoter, Dr. Johan Pell, he would reply me in less than 10 minutes that it had errors. So I was hopeless, frustrated. Um, I think he must have, had a gift of telepathy because he sent me a voice note saying, Naj, please go to sleep. Like, leave the data aside. Then I went to sleep. And in my dreams, all I saw were numbers, 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 and more numbers. So the next morning, after a good breakfast, I opened the spreadsheet again. And in just 30 minutes, I sent him a new version. And this time, he replied me that he couldn't find any errors. I was like, thank God. So we proceeded with the statistical analysis and submitted the work to Nature Scientific Reports after 2 rounds of intense revisions. With more than 10 pages of reviewer comments, it was finally published. And this whole experience reminded me of vital lesson. In research, patience and perseverance are not just virtues, they are the keys to discovery and success. So, in summary, the core focus of my PhD was on eye tracking based functional biomarkers for detecting dysfunctions in the visual system. We tested the feasibility and clinical applicability of our prototype and protocols across a wide range of approximately 500 participants, healthy adults and children, adults with glaucoma, neuroophthalmic patients, including like children with neuroophthalmic conditions. So it was a wide range of participants. So my mandatory chapters were ready, and I had been given the green signal to start preparing my PhD thesis. As I mentioned, working with 2 different prototypes, a single screen and dual screen setup, and 2 distinct test protocols, eye movement perimetry and pupillometry. On top of that, I had, uh, as you know, quite diverse participant groups, including adults, children, people with glaucoma, people with neuroophthalmic conditions, children with neuroophthalmic conditions. So for a week or two, I found myself a bit stuck. Like trying to figure out like how to bring all these pieces together under a single coherent story. uh, and then one fine day I started to roughly scribble all this information, which later turned into a flow chart. And I showed it to my promoters and co-promoter, and they said, I think we think this is a perfect beginning for your thesis discussion. So that was it. I was back on track, luckily. From that moment, I realized just how important it is to use summary tables, flowcharts, basically visual tools to tell the whole story clearly. Finally, I had my full thesis draft with 8 chapters, 6 based on the key findings I shared with you earlier, and the remaining 2 covering the general introduction and general discussion. Once the full draft was ready, I was advised to first submit it to my promoters and co-promoter for a final check. After their approval, it was sent to an external reading committee consisting of 3 experts in my research area. All of this was navigated through the university's student portal called Hora Finita. In less than 2 months, my PhD thesis was reviewed and we received valuable but mostly minor suggestions from the panel members. We carefully evaluated the feedback and incorporated all the points that were relevant and improved the quality of the text. The next step was to print the thesis. So, according to the university guidelines, the PhD copy is not a regular color bound book, like the usual one that we do for master's thesis and even most of the PhD thesis. So the Erasmus PhD should carry some creative idea from the candidate. So we started brainstorming again on the cover designs. And one day, while I was talking virtually with Dr. Johan Pell, we noticed a large withered oak tree in his background. Um, and we both paused to look at it, and he said, uh, why don't you try drawing a tree for a cover, for your PhD thesis cover? So I immediately agreed, and with the help of Dr. Pell and Dr. Ronnie, I conceptualized and designed what we call the brain tree, a representation of the entire system we were evaluating with the proposed protocols. The sketch was later digitized by my husband, so truly making this a team effort in uh, the literal sense. The thesis copies were then officially submitted to the Defense Committee along with other university officials. After that, I waited for the final step, the defense ceremony. So I was to first give asked to give a layman friendly talk. So basically a public presentation, not the core scientific presentation. So that's a part of the university guidelines. And then I have to face a viva from a panel of 8 members, including 5 external experts and 3 internal members. So I started working on my slides. I prepared the first draft for my final defense, dedicated a whole month with full focus. And in the last week of January, so my final defense is in the month of February. Okay, so um, in the last week of January, I presented it to Dr. Johan and Dr. Deepmala. Um, After the third slide, Johan stopped me and said, Naj, don't present. Just let me glance through the slides. So I did. And then he said, I think you have to delete the whole thing. So this is not what a layman's talk is supposed to look like, because we are so tuned to deliver everything in a very scientific research term kind of a way, right? So it was very difficult to, visualize or conceptualize the whole thing and squeeze it into a laymanish talk. Uh, and I think when I heard it, my blood literally drained from my face in that moment. So 1 month of hard work, and just like that, it felt like it was all gone. He didn't scold me, of course, but he had to be honest, right? So I was like completely off track. So it was Dr. Dibmala who said, Naj, you are a good storyteller, aren't you? So why don't you make your slides a story? Um, like imagine a person coming to your clinic, they undergo the conventional evaluation, and then you introduce them to the new protocol, something like that. So, and that was the spark I needed. So over that weekend, that is Saturday, Sunday, I made a completely new set of slides after like a couple of hours spent on developing the story that she said. And on Monday, I presented it to the internal panel, and just minor refinements was enough. So my defense slides were ready. Then came the big day. I had 15 minutes of the layman friendly talk, followed by 45 minutes of Viva and open defense, answering questions from all 8 panel members. The mission of my PhD was accomplished, and I'm so grateful that my family, friends, and all loved ones were around there to celebrate the day. Uh, it was kind of my day. It truly turned out to be one of the most beautiful days of my life so far, and I'm sure it will remain one of the most precious days forever. Soon after my PhD, I joined the same research group as a postdoctoral fellow. Our team went through some changes, and I started working alongside Sangeeta, our new PhD student. During that period, we shifted our focus a little bit. Instead of concentrating solely on clinical functional evaluation using perimetry and pupillometry, we wanted to explore how eye tracking technology can help us in understanding the functional consequences of glaucoma more broadly. So, our main focus was on experimental paradigms involving target oriented visual search as well as free viewing tasks. So we went around the city of Chennai. We captured real life scenes as a huge set, and we then selected a few images following a uh, predefined set of criteria and used those for our visual search and free viewing experiments. So, this was our experimental setup. Participants were asked to either perform a target oriented visual search or simply engage in free viewing. So, we extracted gaze metrics and also generated visualization maps that you can see on the right side here, including gaze plots, heat maps, and cluster maps. So, basically, understanding which area of the real life scene that the participants are interested in. So basically they gaze parameters while making either free viewing or a target oriented search. So our first set of findings from this work was published in the Journal of Glaucoma. Rest of the work is in progress. We published one more paper on the same line, and two are in preparation. Um, While in my previous slides, I know I focus more on my core research work. I would like to take a moment to share that during my PhD and first postdoctoral journey, I had the privilege of working with many inspiring people in the field of vision science, both mentors who guided me and mentees I had the opportunity to support. I want to acknowledge all of them for the meaningful interactions, great learning experiences, networking, and collaborations we shared. Although I won't be able to give the details of each project due to time constraint, these experiences have been really an invaluable part of my journey so far. Um, Fast forward to 2025 came a turning point in my journey. It was a time to step out of familiar spaces, familiar faces, and everything I was comfortable with and move to something completely new. I applied for a research fellow position at the National University of Singapore at the Iron Brain Lab. One of the key reasons, I think the sole reason, was Dr. Raymond Najiya, who leads the lab and serves as the director of research in the Department of Ophthalmology. Uh, his work was something I had been closely following throughout my own research in eye movement perimetry and pupillometry. I submitted my CV expressing interest, and soon after, I think one day after, I had the opportunity to have a virtual meeting with him, and I still clearly remember that moment, especially when he said, "Welcome to Singapore." So within just a few weeks, we wrapped up a cherished chapter in a familiar city, packed up a life, and stepped into something completely new. And now here I am in Singapore, working as a research fellow at the Eye and Brain Lab under the supervision of Dr. Ray. One of the main focuses of the lab is Project Lightspan, a clinical trial exploring light-based interventions for myopia control in children. Uh, the idea is quite interesting. We know that light exposure plays an important role in eye development, especially in children. So, this project aims to optimize how children are exposed to light in daily routine using a combination of technological and digital strategies such as monitoring light exposure, guiding behavioral patterns, and using um, smart systems to ensure they receive the right amount and quality of light. The project is funded by NRF and bridges clinical research with real world applications. So, for me, this has been a very different experience compared to my earlier lab based work, being part of a large scale clinical trial involving multiple stakeholders. Was initially quite overwhelming, I should say, but working closely with Dr. Ray and the team has been an incredible learning experience. And over time, I'm getting adapted and getting more confident in managing multiple aspects simultaneously, I believe. And another focus of our work is handheld chromatic pupillometry, developed at the Singapore Eye Research Institute. This device uses a customized protocol along with integrated algorithms to compute multiple parameters related to pupil dynamics in response to chromatic stimulation. So, overall, it offers a promising approach for objective and efficient assessment in both clinical and research settings. So, this system is now being evaluated for its clinical utility and feasibility in detecting various visual dysfunctions, as well as changes in the autonomic nervous system. Uh, there's a lot of exciting parallel research happening in the lab, but I have just highlighted two of our main focuses. This is our the team at the Iron Brain lab at NUS and SERI. If you are interested, you can follow our updates on social media and also host. We also host monthly webinars featuring leading researchers and clinicians in ophthalmology and vision science. You're very welcome to join. So to wrap up, I leave you with one final lesson from my journey. Um, don't be afraid of change. If you feel too comfortable in a place, it might be your time to move. So you can adapt to change, and change brings growth. So growth opens a lot of doors that you never imagined, and it shapes you in a way you couldn't even anticipate. So embracing change can lead to new beginnings. Um, all the best to all of you, and thank you so much for having me today. Thank you.
Thank you for your insightful presentation and talk, ma'am. I'm very proud that you're for your accomplishment and achievement as a junior.
Thank you, Shamla.
So we can take a couple of questions.
Sure.
First question is from Vashini. What is the correlation between SRT and test duration?
What is the correlation between?
SRT and test duration.
Oh, okay. That's quite interesting. So, thank you for the question. I don't have a solid correlation plot that we did, but from the experience, we tend to see that when the test duration is actually longer, the SRT tends to get delayed because there is an aspect of fatigue that comes into play. So when we had the full field test protocol in the beginning, right, it was almost about 12 minutes per eye. So we were not able to get reliable SRTs towards the end of the session. That was the reason why we had to literally trim down the whole session. So we end up with the fastest protocol possible. So we get the reliable SRT measure. I hope that answers the question.
The next question is from Anushya.
Mhm.
Did your definition of good research change as you progressed? The first question. The second question from her is, if you could go back to the beginning of your research journey, what advice would you give your younger self?
Ah, the f- the first question is good research, right? Okay. Uh, I think the definition of good research was always maintain ethical practice throughout the process of the research. That was what I believed from the beginning till now. But the strength of the belief has, I think, improved or got polished as I grew as a person. So it is still the same, but in a very intense and polished way, I should say. Um, the second question, I was so influenced by, of course, positively influenced by my mentors and seniors around. Whenever they were doing research or doing PhD, I was getting positively influenced, but there was a lot of peer pressure. So I think I would tell my younger self, research is not a piece of cake, and you should never opt for research arena if your interest is not really into research. So it's not because somebody else is doing, then you start pursuing research. If you really feel your competency, your skill set, and your profession is diverting or driving towards research, then you have to pursue it. If, for example, if somebody has so good skill set on corporate skills or teaching skills, if you feel yes, your profession will benefit from PhD, then you should take it up, not just because your seniors or mentors are excelling in research. So peer pressure should be in a very positive way, not a negative influence. Interesting question. Yeah, thank you.
So the next question is from Purvika. How can an optometry student contribute to neuroscience-based research early in the career?
Okay, if you are an undergraduate student, the best thing to start off with is clinical observation. So, as I said during the talk, uh, research is something that we systematically do to answer the questions in the clinical world. So clinical world is always asking for questions, so the gap lies in the clinical world. So research is basically a systematic process of answering the question. So there is always a to and fro um, information that gets passed on from the clinical world to the research and vice versa. So as a research student, if you are interested in research, the whether it is neuroscience or any other subspecialties, the best way to start is keenly observe clinical cases, look for unique clinical presentation. If you have the opportunity to communicate with the senior member of like who is involved in the case, see for the potential of writing a case report or a case series. So that is the best way to slowly make your small steps in research. It doesn't apply just to neuroscience, but research in general.
So through Google Form we circulated. We have some questions. First
Mhm.
question is from Mr. Viraj. Which were your top three principles or mantras to make the right decision in your academic journey? The second question is, if you were given a chance to go back in time, how differently could you have changed the outcome? Third question is, which three mistakes taught you the most?
Okay, now I should recollect the question. Thank you, Viraj.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
I'll
the
tell you.
first one is Three mantras? Or
Which were your
who?
top three mantras to make the right decision in your academic journey?
Okay. Uh, First and second, I would say my like talking to my support system, whether it includes my family or experienced mentors, especially my PhD promoters and co-promoter. So whenever I had any kind of queries, I had the support system to lean on, and then they were able to give me advices that really helped me throughout the journey, not then but also now. So first two mantras were definitely taking inputs from experienced people. So I would give it first and the second rank, I think, the same one. uh, the third one was, in the beginning I was more focused on big goals, like very futuristic, and I always used to get overwhelmed with the big goals I have. Then later I realized that it's so important to, focus on small steps. So the small steps that will take me to the bigger one. So uh, l- instead of looking at the big picture, I wanted to focus on small steps at a time. So not short term goals basically. So that is also one of my mantras, I think. Can you repeat the second question,
Yes.
Shamala? Sorry.
If you were given a chance to go back in time, how differently could you have changed the outcome?
Hmm. I think I don't want to change the trajectory of my professional career. I think I'm here today because of whatever happened, good or bad, during the past year. So every mistake was a big learning. So I don't repeat them. So I think I won't prefer to change. So let it be as it is. Yes.
The next question is from Mirdula. How do you handle setbacks or failed experiments during your research?
Hmm. During the beginning of the research work, we always have this enthusiasm to do things. And being, if you are on a high performing student from the academic setting, like during your undergrad and postgrad, you always want the best thing to happen, right? Because you are not trained to handle failures. But research actually taught me a lot of setbacks, failed moments, like especially when things were not happening the way I want. Like I was making mistakes, then I was getting criticized. Things were not, like especially when you have humans involved in research, like as research participants, there is a lot of natural variability and biological aspects involved in your data, so you cannot control the outcome so much. Only thing that you can do is try your best to do research in the best way possible. So again, whenever there was a failure, of course I had moments of distress, disappointment, crying out loud. Again, I went back to my family, who understood me on a personal level, and mentors. I think research becomes way better if you are blessed with good mentors who are supportive on a personal and professional level. So I was so blessed to have so good human beings as my mentors during PhD, the first postdoc, and now the postdoc at Iron Brain. So yeah.
So the final question is from me. What
Mhm.
strategies would you recommend for early career researchers to successfully apply for grant?
Oh, apply grant. I don't think I'm a best person to answer this because I am also on a early career researcher tag who is applying for a grant. So the best thing I think to do is to collaborate with experienced mentors and principal investigators who have a lot of uh, successful grant experiences in the future. Slowly, like piggyback on them, like understand the way grants work, see for the opportunities. Like you will not be able to make an independent grant at the beginning, but you will be able to, contribute to the larger grant in whichever way possible. And then there will be a stage where you are eligible to apply for grants, especially if like young PhD reward, like young investigators grant, which a young PhD student or a researcher can apply, or during PhD if you can apply for scholarships. So that will be your independent attempt, but of course under the supervision of your mentors. And it will take some time for us to, like, slowly build our CV and resume and package it well for applying independent grant. So it's a kind of a long process. I'm also in the learning phase.
Thank, thank you for your time and consideration, ma'am. It's a very interactive session with you. And
Thank you
thank you
so
all for
much.
the questions. Before we close, I just posted the today's quiz link in the chat box. After filling this, you will be able to get OCA certification with 2 credit points, which is signed by both Achyuta and Hussein. To do fill and submit it to get the certification. Thank you, Dr. Najiya, and everyone for the
Thank you
good
so
time.
much. Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you.